Welcome everyone to the Career Farm webinar for EM Lyon Business School alumni, and an extra welcome to current students who may have also joined us. Today's webinar covers how to understand the current market and players in the sustainable jobs market. This session is packed with insights and trends across the evolving impact sector. I'm Alison Edmonds, hosting today's session, and I'm delighted to welcome our speaker today, Shannon Howd. Shannon Howd has over 20 years experience mentoring, coaching, and training international professionals in the impact sector. Previously, Shannon has enjoyed an extraordinary portfolio career, changing jobs regularly to include hiring manager, business strategist and accountant, and a corporate responsibility management consultant, with organizations such as Deloitte, Barclays, GE Capital, Adobe, and World Wildlife Fund. An example of her corporate responsibility includes delivering CR projects globally for FTSE 250 clients, including Cadbury Schweppes, Nokia, Reuters, UNICEF, Vodafone, and Yell. Shannon also has an MBA in International Management from Thunderbird. Shannon, we are really excited to hear your insights. Thank you for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Alison, for the introduction and for hosting this great event. Welcome to all of you alums and students. It's great to almost see you here today. I look forward to hearing your questions at the end of our session and hopefully making this a little bit of an engaging session, even though it's a bit strange in the virtual world, isn't it? So welcome everyone. And as Alison said, we're going to be looking today at the current market and specifically about making a career in the space of the impact world. And I think I'd like to just kick off, which I've done in a recent book I've published at the beginning, talking about semantics, because there's a lot of different routes to careers in this space. And I think about it as kind of the umbrella is called the impact sector, as Alison mentioned. But there's lots of keywords that flop around underneath that. Anything from, sustainability, environmental, resilience, corporate responsibility, impact investing. There's so many different kind of keywords and routes to having an impact. So just keep that in mind today that, even if I'm using specific language, you can always plug in almost your own language of the area you're going to be niching into. And or how you think your audience is going to be talking about these issues, because each sector, each company, and each player in this space really does use different language. So just think about that. But today, I'm not actually focusing on any one of those. It's really more of a general talk today. And it's important that you do match your semantics and the language to your audience when you do go out into the market. So just kicking off with that as a framing. And as Alison said, I've been in your shoes. I got my MBA about 18 years ago, moved from the US to Europe. I've lived in Patagonia, Chile, and run an ecotourism company. I've been an accountant, a management consultant. I've worn lots of hats and actually reinvented myself probably 6 or 7 times in my career. So I'm very comfortable with the ability to make a career change, and that's what I coach my clients through. I currently live in north of London in Cambridge, but originally from Washington, DC. And again, I kind of straddle the global sphere of working with change leaders all over the world. I've coached more than 3,000 hours and 1,000 coaching clients, and really enjoy helping people like you to marry up your purpose with your passion and then a paycheck. Those are kind of my key P's that I always think about. And being able to identify those for yourself is going to be one of the first steps that you're going to need to do in order to know where you want to go next in your career. So passion, purpose, and then how do you convert that into a paycheck? So what we're going to be covering today is a bit about the key resources that are out there in the market. I think we're all a little bit information overloaded and overwhelmed on a daily basis. And again, as this whole impact agenda is evolving, there's more and more coming at us, and that we're going to have to learn to navigate, and where do we really need to be doing research individually to stay ahead of the market and keep on top of the trends. We're going to also be looking at some of those market trends and the hiring trends, what's happening in the jobs market, as well as looking at how do you make a career change? What are some of my top tips as a recruiter? I've been doing recruitment in the sustainability space for more than 20 years. So I'll give you some of my top tips, and then look at a few of the different tracks and how you can start to figure out where you fit in to the market. So let's dive in. So first of all, I'd love you to write down 1 or 2 keywords that is blocking you right now. So it could be that you're making a career change. It could be that you're trying to get a promotion internally. It could be you're looking at going back and getting another certification. Whatever it is you're kind of niggling with that you think you want to do next, or that you're aiming for, something is blocking you, or something is just keeping you from being able to make the progress you want to make. What is that? Is it a fear? Is it resources? You know, what is that one thing that's your hurdle right now? Just write that word down, because that's the one thing I'd love you to keep center of mind today, to hopefully have this workshop help you to overcome that one key challenge or hurdle. Great. Now, most of you, depending on where you are in your careers, I know we have a lot of alums and current students on the line today. So again, I'm going to be kind of talking more generically around those of you that want to be breaking into or move within the impact sector and to change jobs and or grow within that sector. And we're challenged in this space, and then there's a few reasons. We really just want this process to be easier than it is, right? Can we just go to the job boards, find a job, apply to job, get interview, and get new job? Unfortunately, it's not that straightforward in the impact space, because it's evolving so quickly and it's so diversified across different sectors and industries. And because it's evolving so quickly, again, the semantics are changing, the key issues are changing. I mean, you can see now that climate change is on the front page of every single newspaper now. And 15 years ago, or 18 years ago, even when I was getting my MBA, there were not even sustainability programs or masters of science focused on the environment yet in the master's programs. So we've come a long way in 18 years, but it's still evolving so quickly. And it's not really a linear career path. It's not like being an accountant or a lawyer or a teacher where you kind of have it mapped out for you. This is one of those career tracks or paths that you're going to have to navigate for yourself. It's going to be a very individual evolution of where you want to go next and how you're going to get there, and be strategic about getting there. So hopefully you're comfortable with a bit of the ambiguity, and about also becoming more confident in your own uniqueness, because each of you have the capacity, the skills, the networks, and the ability to get whatever job you want. I truly believe that. I've seen that over the years, and I've worked with so many diverse people in the last 12 years of running this career business that, you know, if you believe it, then your audience is going to believe it. But that challenge of being unique means you've got to believe it, and you've got to be able to know how to talk about it and know how to position yourself as a brand. And that's going to take creativity, both in terms of overcoming this ambiguity of a nonlinear path, this market evolving, the fact that it's not that easy, and we have to be networking now a lot more and using our resources of people that we know more than job boards to get those jobs. This is going to be a challenge. So are you ready for that challenge? How badly do you want it? But if you choose a job that you love, you will never have to work a day in your life. And I truly believe that. We spend so much time in the office or working, if you think about it, compared to how much time we spend with our loved ones. It matters to make it something that you really are passionate and purposeful about. And I always get asked the question, especially from current students, you know, how long is it going to take me to find a job? And it's always longer than you think, to be quite honest. Most people think it's, oh, it'll take me a month, you know, a couple months, 3 months maximum, and I'll be in my new dream job post-graduation, or I can make a job change while working. It actually is, there's an average of, for every 10,000 US dollars that you want to earn, it'll take you about a month. So if you want to make 100,000 US dollars, which is about 75,000 pounds, you are per year, you are going to be looking at a 10-month process. So get prepared for the long game in this process, because it doesn't ever happen as quickly as you want. And the response from recruiters and headhunters and hiring managers is rarely as quickly as you also want it to be. So just get prepared for that. And I think it'll make it a lot easier that your expectations are set at a neutral level. And before you do much else, we've really got to know, well, what do you need to know? So what are the market trends and things and key resources that you need to know to be able to stay up to speed in this space? And the first one is definitely the SDGs. You need to research them. You need to know what they are. You need to know what companies are using them for their reporting. You need to know what the UN is doing in terms of trying to engage organizations and nonprofits and governments around these SDGs, or what we call the Sustainable Development Goals. And then you got to keep your finger on the pulse about the COPs. I think we've got our next one coming up here, COP26, which is very exciting, but you need to keep on top of what are governments doing? Who's at the table? What are some of the regulations that are changing? And what are the issue areas that you really want to focus on where you need to keep your finger on the pulse? There's also a lot of indices out there, or frameworks, or standards. And again, those are going to vary depending on what area you want to focus on or where you want to niche. So there's some specifically for the built environment. There's others specifically for sustainable apparel. So you've almost got to know exactly what you want, or use the research process to figure out what you want, and then really niche into one of those areas and get to know what are the indices, the awards, the standards, or the frameworks that you're going to need to know to be able to be relevant to your future audience. And this is one that I really like because it actually includes more than just the environmental KPIs or criteria. This actually is looking at, it's called the Social Progress Index, and it's looking at how do we look at countries as a whole around more than just the GDP. How do we measure progress of a company, of a country, not a company, of a country, based on key criteria that are not necessarily only linked to the GDP. And what I love about this is they break it into, they have many, many criteria within this, but 3 categories: basic human needs, foundations of well-being, and opportunity. I just think this is a refreshed way to look at how successful are we being as countries in this space. And then you need to figure out what are the white papers you need to be staying on top of. What are the things you need to be reading about that are coming out, that are pieces of research that keep you up to date and abreast of what's happening in this space. So some of these are about the market in general. Some of these are about specific roles, like a chief sustainability officer or an intrapreneur rather. And some of these are about general careers content. So it really depends on what you're wanting to deep dive into, but pretty much everything is on Google now, and you can find these quite easily, but these are my top 7. And then you want to figure out, well, what are the actual news and blogs and channels I want to be following, because this is overwhelming. So I would always say just pick 5 of these that you think really resonate with you in terms of the type of content that they're putting out there that is the most relevant for where you want to be going next. Rather than casting your net super wide, we're wanting you to get a little bit more focused in and get a bit more niche and expert in certain key areas. So again, you might not be as focused on the sustainable business space if you're wanting to go into the NGO world. You might then look at Ashoka or We Mean Business. If you want to do impact investing, you might be looking at GIN. So it really depends on where you start to think you're going to be fitting in and targeting as to how you can narrow down what kinds of information you're going to be getting dropped into your email box every day. And on my online course, which is a 13-step program to help you make a career change, is a whole curated content area around the resources I think that you need to really keep your finger on the pulse. And what I do is every few months, I update this list with all these different tools and resources for my clients. And this is the same kind of thing you probably want to keep your finger on the pulse around in terms of which of these issues and specific resources are going to be the most useful for you in terms of staying up to date and relevant for your personal audience. And you might need to, again, just keep researching, right? There's always new legislation and new laws that can create risk or opportunity for your target organizations, and you need to stay on top of those. You need to be knowing what's happening globally in the context for the types of organizations you're targeting, whether it's trade or environmental or multilateral agreements. You want to know what's happening at the local level. So what's affecting your country, your city, your state, your region, and what are those local leaders actually prioritizing? Thinking about the environmental shifts, so anything from natural resource availability and weather events to scientific knowledge that's coming out, what's providing more evidence that these issues matter. And we're getting more and more evidence because we've now got 20 years worth of people really promoting and studying these both academically but also within business. And then also looking at the workforce trends. So how is the work landscape shifting as new generations and mindsets come into play? And then again, the standards. So standards, frameworks, indices, really knowing which ones of those that are going to be the most relevant for you and your future hiring manager or audience. So in terms of kind of what we're seeing in the market, again, a lot of this is now front page news, and we're seeing a lot of trends come up. There's more and more on LinkedIn. There's more and more on social media that you can follow. But in terms of what I'm seeing is the top kind of market trends that will affect us in this job search process, I'd love to take you through just a few key things that came out of the Green Biz report, State of the Profession. And I'm not going to read all of these. You can read them yourself. But the one that I think is most important here is that we're seeing there is a growth in sustainability teams. And over the past decade, we've seen team sizes growing and growing. And that's good because it means there's more jobs for us that want to be in sustainability roles. But at the same time, we want to be embedding these issues into non-sustainability jobs across organizations. So there's more and more people in organizations that are doing sustainability, but they might not have it in their title. And that's also important to think about when you decide where you want to be going next, is do you actually need one of the keywords in your title, or is it that you just want to be doing the good work and you could be sitting in a core business role rather than a role that's sitting in a sustainability team? And then some of the issues that we're seeing in terms of trends going down, we've seen a 10% decrease of large companies having no executives. So that's a double negative there, but we're basically seeing more executives now working full-time on sustainability over the past decade, which means, again, this is becoming more of a C-suite issue. Some of you all have been following the BlackRock, Larry Fink momentum that he's been putting out there, movement that he's started around getting CEOs engaged in these issues around ESG, and the letter that he sent out about a year ago now to really motivate chief whatever officers, so the whole C-suite, around prioritizing climate change and social impact issues. So I think we're seeing a new movement where now we have investors and we have the investment community on board and seeing the actual measurable results, so that this is becoming more of a top table agenda. And we've been working hard to get it there for 20 years. So this is a really big tipping point in this space. And then in terms of sustainability and social impact, in terms of our need for experts in the field, Again, more and more jobs being posted daily with these keywords in them. There was an article just this week that I reposted on LinkedIn by one of my clients at LinkedIn, Peggy Brannigan, about the earth is hiring, and she had a whole list of skills and different jobs that LinkedIn is now posting that are related to the green agenda or the green sector, which didn't exist just a couple of years ago. So there is a much bigger demand for types of experts like you all coming into the market. And one thing that, again, back to that issue with Larry Fink kind of promoting this at C-suite level, we're seeing more and more investors reframing their risk around ESG. And for those of you that don't know, ESG is environmental social governance. This language, again, back to semantics, is getting overused now and almost substituting the word sustainability or sustainable business. But it actually covers environmental, social, and governance. So it's really this, again, almost an umbrella over those three different types of roles or types of issue areas that you might be growing your expertise in. And it's becoming a bit more focused on the financial sector and the investment space. But we are seeing more and more proof in the financial markets that sustainability is driving financial results. And so institutional investors are expecting to see continued growth in sustainable investment around the world, and private equity firms are increasingly making forays into responsible investment and ESG performance evaluation and management. So especially in Europe, we're seeing that higher standards are being set to be putting more pressure on boards, and some executives are now even being measured on their achievement of ESG or diversity targets. So it's really refreshing to see this evolving at this rate, especially in light of COVID. I think COVID's actually helped with some of this in some ways in terms of bringing awareness to these key ESG issues. And then I talked at the beginning about passion and purpose leading to your paychecks. Well, we're also looking at organizations are really prioritizing profit as well over, purpose over profit. We actually saw that in 2020, millennials, who made up about 40% of our consumers, believe that the goal of business shouldn't be a healthy bottom line, but rather about contributing to society. And the best places to work have more than doubled the performance of the S&P 500. At the same time, 3 out of 4 millennials would take a pay cut to work for a more sustainable company. And 40% of millennials have chosen one job over another because of how they viewed the company's sustainability, and more than 40% have committed more time and effort to a company because they were happy with its sustainability agenda. So again, companies are starting to realize that this is key to attracting and retaining top talent, especially with this new, we're not new, but younger generation of consumers and employees. And we're also seeing that social impact is really moving up the agenda as well. There is now far greater focus on issues such as diversity, equity, poverty, human rights. So don't discount yourself if that's where your expertise lies, just because it's not about carbon or climate change or the environment. Because this space around social impact and justice is really starting to get a lot more exposure and momentum. And according to a survey of 150 executives by Porter Novelli in 2020, 71% said they never in their entire careers had felt more pressure to engage with issues of social justice. So we're seeing again at the top table at the C-suite pressure to prioritize the social impact issues. And therefore the demand for experts in the workplace diversity space became one of the fastest growing areas recruited for, according to LinkedIn last year. So again, I would say try to map where you want to be sitting in terms of some of your issues, and then what your sector or industry is going to be, where and how do they talk about these issues and prioritize them. And again, where are your senior leaders in those organizations? how are they talking about and prioritizing these issues? Because this is going to really be driven by a top-down approach. And then in terms of market trends, again, we saw last year this growing relationship between purpose-led business and corporate success. A lot of companies now are stepping up recruitment of specialist sustainability and impact roles, which is very exciting. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, green jobs are looking like the place to be, with an outlook of 105% growth between 2012 and 2026. So really, we're seeing that more and more of these types of roles are going to be coming into the market. And the International Renewable Energy Agency estimates that renewable energy could employ more than 40 million people by 2050. And energy efficiency also offers the potential of up to 2.5 million new jobs per year. So as you can see, the pace of change and growth is phenomenal and exciting, and it means that each and every one of you can shape a career to break into this space if that's what you really are passionate and purposeful about. So before we move on to the next section, I'd love just to hear from you, or actually have you just write it down. We're not able to interact too much today, but which of those trends and which of these issues and which of these areas are getting you really passionate? What is mattering to you most? What do you want to put your stake in the ground about in terms of shaping change? And therefore, what do you want to learn more about? What do you want to go and research more? What are you curious about? And then where could you focus your time, your research time, in diving in deeper into the market and getting a bit more niche and a bit more focused? So give yourself a couple of minutes to answer these questions, and then think about how you're going to apply this off the back of our session today. Okay, great. So now we want to look a bit at the hiring trends, what's happening actually in the specific jobs market. I always say that you need to get focused and don't cast your net too wide. The person who does not know where he wants to go, there is no favorable wind. Meaning you need to know who you're targeting, where you want to go next, and have done that kind of deep dive personal journey into figuring that out before you go out and start trying to promote yourself and apply to jobs. And being flexible across public, private, and NGO sectors isn't actually going to help you to get a job. So casting your net wide, being super open to lots of different options, is actually going to work against you, contrary to what many of us think, that we want to keep open-minded so that we could see ourselves working in lots of different areas. But actually, it doesn't work when you have to go out and present yourself in a resume or CV or on LinkedIn or even verbally if you're too all over the place. So we really need to get you to focus in on either public or private or NGO sector, and then even more specifically, what industry do you want to then focus in on that you either know well or you're interested in. We're seeing about a 58% increase in ESG headcount, which is fantastic. Impact salaries rose by 21% in the last year, which is amazing. Companies are hiring more from outside than internally, which is a big shift. It used to be we were hiring up from within. I think we had in 2012 about 45% of sustainability hires came from outside, and now it's 67% are being hired externally, which again is good news if you're looking to make a move to another organization. We've got 73% of CEOs that are interested in or engaging in these programs, like I mentioned earlier. And data and reporting skills look to continue to be in demand. So in 2011, only 20% of S&P 500 companies were publishing sustainability reports. And 8 years later, in 2019, that number had reached 90% of S&P companies, 500 companies publishing sustainability reports. So a couple things just to keep in mind. Again, we talked earlier about semantics and how inconsistent they are and how keywords are not always going to be the same across industries or sectors. So again, just knowing what your audience is calling things and how you can align your personal brand stories to match that is going to be really important. I tend to use the word the impact sector or the purpose economy, but again, they're very vague. So again, the more specific you can get in your language, the better. If you use the word sustainability or ESG too much in your branding stories, as a recruiter, I'm not still going to quite know exactly what it is you're an expert in because they're too big of the kind of high level umbrella terms. So make sure you're drilling down on what do you really mean when you're using some of these keywords. Entrepreneurship is another thing to keep in mind. Most companies now are looking at these issues as competitive advantage, ways to mitigate reputational, regulatory, or operational risks or create opportunities out of them. And so they're looking for people that are really ready to be creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial. And if you're sitting within an organization, we now call that intrapreneurship. And there's also a term called social entrepreneurship or social intrapreneurship, meaning that you might be starting an initiative or an organization to solve a problem of that community or that society. And lastly, we're seeing that specialists are really thriving over generalists. So back to my point around keeping as focused as you can get and getting that expertise on one or two specific areas and getting as narrowed in as possible. It's going to really help you in terms of navigating your career and evolving within it. The more you can have a specialism, the more you're going to be unique in that space. So for instance, when I started my career coaching business, I could have been just a generic career coach. But because I had an expertise in sustainability, I decided to marry the two. And that's what's allowed me to really grow my business. And thinking about how you're spending your time in terms of the job search, you'll see here that especially as you get more senior, from staff to manager to director to VP, as you get more senior, more and more likely that you will find a role or get a job through human connections or personal contacts. So it depends on where you kind of are in your journey and how senior you are, but you'll see that as you get more senior, the more and more you're going to need to be really leveraging your personal relationships and picking up the phone and talking to people. Also to unpack what we call the hidden jobs market. 60% of roles are never even posted externally, which is a huge amount. So if you're talking to people and keeping your networks alive, you're going to be more likely to hear about something that's come up or have somebody call you for a role that might not even be posted in the public space. So those of you that are making a career change or even just looking to move roles or looking for your first role out of graduation, these tips are going to apply no matter what. One of my favorite quotes is, don't ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, but what problems do they want to solve? This changes the conversation from who do I want to work for to what do I need to learn to be able to do that. So back to this point of what are you putting your stake in the ground around? What research do you need to be doing? How can you grow your expertise through understanding the frameworks and the standards to become an expert at solving one or two specific problems within this ESG or impact agenda? One thing I hear a lot is, okay, if I'm making a career change, I might as well just throw it all away and start over and do what I really love and change everything. But that actually doesn't work either. Just like the casting the net wide doesn't work. This doesn't work because the market or the recruiter or the hiring manager isn't going to know what to do with you if all of your historical information and experience isn't relevant to the next thing. But if you're changing just one thing at a time, so one thing being either your role or your sector or your issue areas of expertise or your location. If you're changing one of those major things at a time, it means you can incrementally get to where you ultimately want to be. If you're trying to change everything for the dream job, you might need to be taking that interim step en route. And that is important because, again, if you change too many things, you're not going to be relevant enough to the reader, to the audience. And so we need to be able to translate how that one thing that you're changing is going to be relevant for that new role or that new post, but that it doesn't matter that you don't have all the exact experience that they're looking for. You can have up to 80%, 70% of what they're looking for and still get the role. And I always encourage you, just apply. If you think you're almost there, that you could hit 70% of what they're looking for, but just make sure that you've customized your application to have done the translation of where you've come from to where you want to be going. That is the crucial piece. And again, you might need that interim step to help you get that one step closer to where you want to be in 2 to 3 years. I don't even think it needs to be a 3 to 5 year plan, but you can actually think about what's the one thing I can change now to get me a little bit closer, and then the next change, I can change one more thing, and you're moving on from there. So that way you're incrementally getting closer to that dream job. And a lot of people I hear making career changes or looking for new roles say, oh, I am willing to do whatever it takes. I'll take a pay cut, I'll take a step back. I just want to get in. I just want to make a difference. That's a big no-no. And the reason that's a big no-no is that, again, the market or the hiring managers won't know what to do with you because you'll look A, overqualified, or B, you'll look like you aren't valuing yourself. And oftentimes managers just don't want to hire people that are overqualified, that are going to want to get a promotion immediately or going to be a little bit, too egoistic or whatever that could be. These are all perceptions, of course, but this is what happens if we are lowballing ourselves and going in too low. So try to keep your level the same or a little bit of a step up whenever you're making a job change, and never let yourself take a step back if you can avoid it. You may have to take a salary cut if you're going, let's say, from banking or a legal sector or something like that, or even oil and gas, and you're going to be going and working for an NGO. That's going to be a pay cut, right? So it could be that you need to take a pay cut, but you want to keep your level and your influencing level the same. So it's now your turn again, get your pen and paper out. And I just wanted to, on this section around the hiring trends and career change tips, what is the one biggest takeaway you're taking away from the session today? And how are you going to apply those learnings to your job search? I'll give you a minute to fill that out. Okay, we can come back to some of these questions too. You'll get the slides and the recording later as well. So just in terms of career tracks, a lot of times I hear people say, well, I don't know where I fit into the market. I don't know, I don't know what kinds of jobs I would be good for. I don't even know what's out there. So where I usually start them off is to think about, okay, well, what company or type of company or organization do you want to work for? Do you want to work within a traditional company or organization, or with a sustainability, purpose-driven, mission-driven organization? And then do you want to work within a role that has sustainability or impact or one of these keywords, ESG, in the title? So it's more orientated towards that type of role. Or do you want to work in a traditional role like marketing or finance? And knowing kind of, again, these could be that you need to do one and then you take an interim step towards the other. So let's say I want a sustainability oriented role in a sustainability oriented company, but I've only got traditional. So you might need to move one block over before you move the next block down, if that makes sense. So again, giving you some examples here, you could be a financial analyst at Intel and then wanting to move into still corporate sector. Preferably you would stay, if you're going to make a move, in a similar sector or a sector that has similar challenges and supply chain issues. So if you're moving from B2C to B2B, or you're moving from complex supply chains to a service business, those are going to be harder transitions. This one I love, the traditional role. Again, you're a marketing manager, but you're working for a brand that's very mission driven and socially oriented. So again, thinking about what are the brands or companies that get you excited, and then what are the roles that you think are going to be the best fit for you as your next interim step. So WRI is another example of Sustainable Enterprise Program Manager. So there you're actually doing sustainability within the context of a mission-driven organization. So pick where you want to be on this chart for your next job. Let's just do the next roll out as if it's an interim step rather than trying to jump too far ahead. And the next thing we need to make a decision around again is, what is our niche area of interest? So we looked at that earlier in terms of what are some of the impact issues that you want to put your stake in the ground around, that you really care about, and that you're going to want to try to build that expertise in. So this is the specialism around an issue or knowledge. And oftentimes organizations will call this subject matter expert, or SME, I see a lot, which confuses me because it's also a small to medium-sized enterprise. But subject matter expert is another way to look at this. So what subject matter do you want to be an expert in? And I think it's easiest to pick which of these 4 quadrants. Business and the community came up with these years ago, and I still think they really apply. This is by no means a comprehensive list. There's many more things that sit under each of these, but you could just at least pick your quadrant and then decide, well, then what do I mean by wanting to focus on, let's say, marketplace or community? And then how do you define that for yourself? So again, pick one of these off the top of your head right now, one quadrant. And then if you have some keywords under it that you can think about, go ahead and write those down as well. And lastly, I really encourage you to go out and do your research of the market. I'm always amazed by how little job seekers do a deep dive into the market. So how are recruiters talking about these roles? Or agencies, how are people on LinkedIn that you think have your dream job, how are they talking about these issues? What are those keywords that specific focused track is looking at? What are the skills needed? What are example job titles? And I've done a huge piece of research on this and then turned it into a career tracks tool in my online course, where I look at this for each different kind of track that you might go into, by narrowing it down, having looked at lots of different roles over the last 20 years and what recruiters are talking about in terms of how they shape these agendas. So for instance, I looked at Business for Social Responsibility. It's a consultancy, global consultancy. If I look at what industry areas are they focusing on for their companies, that helps me to define what industries I might want to be targeting, or even issue areas. What issue areas are they working with companies on? That then also helps me to know some of the language I might want to explore further. So you can see, for instance, on the left, BSR's issue areas that they work on with clients: climate change, human rights, inclusive economy, supply chain sustainability, sustainability management, and women's empowerment. So those are the issues they're offering to their clients to be the client expert on, and then helping to service them as consultants. So again, it depends on if you want to go in-house or into a consultancy. Also, doing your research might shift a little bit, or maybe you look at both and then decide after having done the research. But really mapping out the market for yourself is an important first step before you start diving into redoing your personal branding tools like your CV or your LinkedIn. Again, we've got to make sure we resonate and have a compelling story for whoever is going to be reading it. And it's usually going to be a hiring manager or recruiter, or someone maybe even in your network. So I'll leave you with your last little tool here of questions. Where do you think you're going to sit in that careers matrix? So that was the traditional or sustainability type of company and role. So did you decide which of those 4 quadrants you're in? And then which subject matter or issues do you want to grow your expertise in or focus on? That was the colorful quadrants from business and the community: environment, community, workplace, and marketplace. And how are you going to take these learnings about yourself that you've learned today forward? So what's your 1 or 2 actions that you're going to do to take this forward today? All right, I think we're going to be opening it up here in a minute for questions. Before we do, I'd love to just offer you all a 20% discount code with my publisher for my book. If you want to learn more about a lot of these tools I shared with you today, I take you through a 14-step or 14-chapter program. Similar content is in my online course, which you can do as a self-study or in a group or one-on-one with me. So I really hope that you'll share some of what you've learned today with others and spread the word about how to create an impact career. I love it if you connect with me online. Feel free to reach out. If you do on LinkedIn, please tell me how I would know about you, that you were on this webinar. Otherwise, I don't usually accept unless there's some context. And I would say that's true for most people now. But do feel free to follow me on any of these channels. I do post a lot of free content. You can see a lot of it on my website in the Insights page. I have events that I'm speaking at all the time with free content as well. And I host a Coffee and Connect session every month with about 70 to 80 change makers that come to network. So please feel free to sign up for that as well on my website. So I'm going to turn it over now back to Allison, who's going to look at some of our questions. And thanks for your attention.
Great, thank you, Shannon. What a fantastic session, so full of hope and opportunity. And you know, just as I look at the people in the session today, what a talent pool to make some personal career choices and make such a difference, help take us towards a sustainable world. Just a reminder to everyone, please do use the questions area of your control panel if you would like to ask Shannon a question. And very kindly, Shannon has agreed to answer very personal questions separately. So if you've got questions that you think will be really relevant to the group, we'd love to hear them, and I will begin to open those up. Whilst people are thinking, Shannon, I'm just going to start with an opener on LinkedIn. What top tip would you offer alumni and obviously current students as well who have got such a wealth of career already? What top tip would you give about optimizing their profile?
That's my favorite piece of work that I do. Apart from writing resumes, I love doing the LinkedIn work. It is such a powerful tool. So in terms of updating your profile, less is more would be my top tip. Meaning, you know, put everything you've ever done on there if it's relevant, but don't put things on there that really aren't relevant, that are going to confuse or distract your audience. And don't feel that you need to go into detail like you would on a resume or CV. It's just really a headline of your history. If you're going to go into detail, you can do that in the About section. And that's where I really build out kind of a storyboard or a bio section, is in the About space. I'd also just say, I'm giving you more than one tip, but I'd also just say, make sure, again, back to semantics, that you're matching your keywords, because as a recruiter, it's the first place I go. So right now I'm hiring for an ESG reporting person and a GHG, greenhouse gas emissions expert. And for both of those, I'm going to go out and use those keywords when I go search my network on LinkedIn. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So you need to make sure that your keywords are prevalent, and I usually put them as a subtitle under my name. So you can see that if you go into my my profile, you can see how I've done that. My profile is probably not the best example for job seekers because I have a lot of content in there. It's almost like a website for me in terms of how I promote my coaching services. But again, I'd be happy to, there's a whole chapter on that also in my book and in the course. So most important tool you can have in terms of job searching and building your networks is LinkedIn. Be on there 30 minutes a day at a minimum in terms of posting content and reading and following others and their content. That was a lot more than one,
Fantastic.
sorry.
Yes, wow, packed in the tips there. That's brilliant. And actually, there is another great question about certification, but I just want to pick up something that Melissa has mentioned, that she's been in her career doing great many things, very visible and so forth, but hasn't been contacted by a recruiter. And Melissa, I just want to answer that because I think Shannon has already answered that yes, that is a red flag. We do need to look at optimizing that LinkedIn profile and the way that you are visible and really drive your personal brand. I want to go to Zachary's question now. More universities are offering sustainability certifications. What can you say about those versus going back to school for a master's?
Ooh, great question. Really good question. I thought you were going to say versus getting real world experience. So I always suggest, and I know we have a lot of us on the call are all master's graduates, but if you're considering a master's, I always say, prove to me, the recruiter, that you can't do the job, that you're not meeting my requirements of having the master's. Because getting a master's is expensive and time consuming. You might want to do it because it's important to you to have it under your belt. So there could be personal reasons for going back to get it in a master's, but it's an expensive and time consuming investment. So you need to be able to prove that you need it in order to get the job you really want. It's not always the case. It's sometimes people say, oh, I want to make a career change, so I'll just go back and get my master's and that'll just wave a magic wand. It does not, because as recruiters, we want to see the work experience more than we want to see the tick box of the education. So right now, for instance, on those two roles I'm hiring for, we have a bachelor's and a master's preferred. But if they have the experience in GHG or ESG, we're going to take them without the master's over somebody that doesn't have that experience and has the master's. So you've got to weigh that. Secondly, in terms of certifications, I would actually encourage you more to look at things like the standards and frameworks that you're going to need to know. So it could be anything from LEED, looking at a LEED certification, because that's a framework, or looking at HIG index, looking at there's so many out there now. I've got a whole list of them that I keep on my resources page of the online course because, just navigating that alone is a lot, but you can usually see it in the job description. So if it's in the job descriptions that you're seeing time and again, and you're feeling there's a gap there, you need to go back and plug that gap because we will want to know that you are familiar with those standards or frameworks. So that might be a better investment of time than just a generic sustainability certification. But again, it's a very personal choice. I need to understand where you're coming from, where you want to be going, and where we see the gaps are to help you get there. Is it a certification? Is it a master's? Is it work experience? And then make a strategic plan for how to get you there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shannon. People are just probably thinking about more questions at the moment. And while they think about those, I'm just going to pick up something that Madeline has mentioned early on. It's not a question. She's bought your book and thinks it's brilliant. So there you have a super fan in our midst.
Thank you. Thank you,
Matt. I'd like to ask you another question while people think of them. Quite often when we think about the Sustainable Development Goals and all the practice that's going on around the world, there's a lot of inspiring work and a lot of it resonates with us. What could you suggest that will help people to hone in on making a choice to specialize when they may feel that quite a few parts of the Sustainable Development Goals are very important and purposeful to them? What is going to help them to focus in on the one to pick?
It's a really interesting thought because there's a lot of sustainable development goals and some of them overlap a bit too, right? So I would say start at the top line. So do you want to be in the environmental space or the social impact space? That's the first choice. Second choice then, let's say you want to go environment. What do you mean by environment? Are you excited about waste or water or climate or carbon or renewables, or what again do you get too excited when you read and research about them, or when you see other people working in that space? Those are where the kind of the draw is. You know intuitively what actually excites you and what gets you motivated. Once you know a few of those kind of subcategories, start to do the research on them and look at other people in the space and see if you get more interested or less interested as you're reading and doing your research. And that'll just help you hone in a little bit. You don't need to have only one. So you don't just need to say, I just want to work in water. But I do need at least to know that you've focused on 3 rather than 10, okay? Or rather than just saying environment. So if you came back and said, look, I'm an expert, or I want to learn expertise, whatever, in waste, water, and recycling, or waste, water, and packaging, or whatever it is, 3 is fine, but they're a subset of that environmental side of things. Or if you said social impact, fine, it's human rights, labor rights, and social justice. Okay, that's fine too, because those are all somewhat similar in some ways, right? So again, I don't mind if you have a couple of keywords that are going to be the subcategories, but I'd say first pick social or environmental, and then start to drill down and do your research and see what gets you more and more excited.
Right, tremendous top tips. And I notice when I work with clients that sometimes it's quite hard for them to let go of things that they think are really great, but actually intuitively they know, just as you say, deep down, you will know what resonates most. I think we are all at the end of those questions. I'm just going to go back to the slides for a moment. Shannon, there's one more slide which I think is useful to flag up with the audience. And that is just to remind everyone where you can get the recording. You know, because this session is recorded, there will be a copy of the slides and you will be able to access everything from this page. So please feel free to do that. So that just leaves me to say thank you so much for such a super session. Really informative and inspirational. I know I speak on behalf of everyone. So thank you so much, Shannon. And I just want now to bring this session to a close. Thank you everyone for joining us once again. And it's time to say goodbye. Thank you everyone, and bye-bye.
Thanks.